The Valley of the Jedi will soon be mine.
There are some things far more frightening than death.
What's up, Meta Nerds? We're getting a great look at the Inquisitors in the Kenobi show, and Rebels fans are well acquainted with this force. But did you know that their origins come from 41 years ago? First mentioned in the NPR radio adaptation for A New Hope back in 1981, and they've been expanded upon in a ton of other media. You'll see that there's a ton of rich Legends lore to enjoy in its own right, but since Canon pulls characters and ideas back into canon all the time, I'll point out some parallels and how we can use these stories for fun predictions in canon. But first I want to thank this video's sponsor, Aura. Identity theft is America's fastest growing crime. Every year it keeps growing to the point that there's a new victim every 14 seconds. Yet despite this, those who have their identity stolen are often shocked when it happens. Imagine trying to log into your bank account one day only to see your password had been changed hours ago. Then you start getting notifications of activity from your bank, or even from your credit cards and crypto accounts. That's when the anxiety, fear, and anger kick in, which is why I'm excited to work with Aura. What's unique about Aura is that it's the whole package. They offer identity theft protection, fraud monitoring, their own VPN, password management, and antivirus software all combined into one easy-to-use app. Aura actively monitors the dark web for your emails, passwords, and social security numbers, and sends alerts fast, right to your phone and email. When it comes to fraud, every second matters. Connect your credit and bank accounts and get notified on any charges up to 4 times faster than Aura's competitors. While their VPN allows you to stay anonymous online by keeping your browsing history and personal information safe and encrypted. While their antivirus software will block any malware and viruses before they infect your devices. I found that there are 40 places where my information was compromised on the dark web. It only took a few minutes to see this, so for all you who sign up for the free trial, leave a comment down below how many times you found your information. Protect you and your family from America's fastest growing crime. Try Aura free for 2 weeks and see if any of you or your family's personal information has been compromised. Start your free trial at aura.com/metanerds. The Inquisitorius was formed in the earliest days of Palpatine's new empire, within the year 19 BBY, a time when the Senate was still a formidable force. Palpatine knew that even if it was technically legal to permanently extend the emergency powers and make himself a dictator, he couldn't do anything that would provoke massive dissent amongst all the star systems. And he would play nice with the still democratically elected senators, doing whatever he wanted, and just by chance, some policy or project would eventually line up with some political party or movement, until he officially disbanded them in 0 BBY, with the completion of the Death Star.
Rebellion will continue to gain a support in the Imperial Senate.
The Imperial Senate will no longer be of any concern to us. I have just received word that the Emperor has dissolved the Council permanently. The last remnants of the old Republic have been swept away.
The average citizen did not know that he or Darth Vader were Sith Lords, and even most in the Empire would never see Vader. Those that did assumed he was some sort of cyborg warrior like General Grievous. Even the most learned historians of Jedi lore might have called Dooku a Sith, heard reports of Ventress and other red saber-wielding foes of the Jedi, but all reports said that they all died in the Clone Wars, along with the entirety of the Jedi Order. The official stance for the public was that the traitorous Jedi were all but completely destroyed, but they assured them that the leaders like Yoda, Mace Windu, and Kenobi were dead, though they still needed to relentlessly hunt down any lead of some Jedi survivors that might have spread throughout the galaxy. Though almost no one in the galaxy ever met a Jedi, even in their peak of 10,000 members across the stars. Propaganda reinforced the idea of them as a spooky religious cult secretly trying to rule the government, with their mind tricks and powerful weaponry that could be turned against you at any moment. All of this helped to keep the fear up, and the public demanding to keep the powerful leader Palpatine to rebuild after the war and secure peace, as there were still some small pockets of separatists. Jedi tried to kill the Chancellor, built an entire army in secret, and a Jedi led the Separatists, so it was pretty easy to make them seem like an incredibly scary opponent. Jedi were like a person hiding a small nuke or bioweapon. However rare and unlikely that threat is, it could not be permitted. Civil liberties were suspended with executive orders like the LAACD, the Legal Authorization for Advanced Confinement document, which meant that in the extreme circumstance that someone was accused of being a Jedi or helping one, they could be detained indefinitely and punished at the discretion of the military without getting a trial. Extinguishing this threat required a black box budget personally overseen by executive order of the Emperor, while the Senate was appeased to and placated. In a time where just a few years earlier a chunk of government rebelled in open war, it was reasonable to fear spies and anti-imperialists in the Senate, so secret security programs were allowed and funded. This was used to keep the Death Star project hidden, as well as the Inquisitorius. Even some of the highest ranking military officials would not have known of their existence. But through Tarkin, we get this quote: "The Inquisitors are the Emperor's shadowy agents. They are among those whom the Emperor calls his dark side adepts. Chief among their duties is to hunt, capture, and interrogate Jedi. Some of the Inquisitors may even be former Jedi themselves. While classified as part of Imperial intelligence, the Inquisitorius division reports directly to Emperor Palpatine. And an important difference in Legends is that Darth Vader would not head this branch of Imperial intelligence. Though Sidious would often have the Grand Inquisitor work alongside Vader, and defer to Vader, the Grand Inquisitor still directly reported to Sidious, and not Darth Vader. There were many plots and missions that Vader was ignorant of. The GI was given directives, and then would organize the actual team, which eventually grew in numbers to require more structure, from High Inquisitors down to Chiefs, and then simply Inquisitors, each of which could take on an apprentice. The first Inquisitor, and the first Grand Inquisitor, was a human male by the name of Malorum. Tall and sporting a dark red robe like the Emperor, he was only mildly Force-sensitive and was not a Jedi. He was an Imperial intelligence operative that secured the Jedi Temple following Order 66. The air of the temple was filled with the odor of blood and ozone, and in an obscure room he lay eyes on the hologram seen by Yoda in Kenobi, of Palpatine conducting a Sith initiation of Anakin Skywalker. He would never reveal that he learned the most top-secret piece of intel in the entire galaxy, even after Sidious summoned him to a private meeting to feel out the possibility of him falling to the dark side. Malorum would dedicate himself to turning his modest power in the Force into a weapon that Darth Vader would come to respect after several shared missions. Without either of their Sith Lords' knowledge, he would privately investigate the final moments of the war, discovering that Anakin had fathered children with Padme, working with Boba Fett to track down her death to Polis Massa. And this was not out of Vader fanboying, even if the other Imperial intelligence joked that he was Vader's pet. He was hoping to find some slip-up or treachery on Vader's part to replace him one day. Over the years, he became obsessed with hunting down Order 66 survivor Ferrus Olin. And this Jedi's survival was so important that the Force ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn reached out to urge Kenobi to help Olin. And when he did travel to the world Balassa, he learned that the Grand Inquisitor knew that Anakin gave birth to twins, and he was putting the full force of Imperial intel and the underworld into finding out where these kids were now, whether they were dead or alive. Kenobi understood why Jinn felt he had to intervene, and urged Olin to dedicate himself to killing Malorum, while he would travel back to Tatooine to keep an even closer eye on Luke. To try and kill the Grand Inquisitor, Olin would sneak into his new residence, with Malorum setting up in Yoda's former quarters inside the Jedi Temple. In all of hopes of an Imperial promotion, the Grand Inquisitor had set a time bomb to go off when Vader was there, destroying the temple under the apprentice's watch, proving to Sidious a lack in Force detection to find the intruder. But the real Jedi intruder Olin deactivated it, but was captured and subjected to horrendous torture trying to reveal the identity of the man he met on Balassa. Olin never gave up Kenobi's name, and would be brought to the Emperor and fake an embrace of the dark side. Though even he couldn't be sure if he perfectly resisted it at all times, he surely did not fall. Working with the Empire to monitor locations and detect more Jedi, the victims were usually lucky enough to get away, and he was even able to hide some intel that could have eliminated some rebel leaders. In this role, he was considered an Inquisitor, but he would kill Malorum on Naboo in the year 18 BBY, after the Grand Inquisitor basically confirmed the survival of Padme's children. The new Grand Inquisitor was Hydra, a human female apprentice of Malorum, and one of her first missions brought her and Olin to Alderaan, all in search of suspected Force-sensitive children. Olin had known Bail Organa from his days as a rebel organizer, and is one that helped Jedi on the run, with Bail being one of the original members of what would become the Rebel Alliance. Bail was skeptical of Olin's claims to be essentially a double agent within the Inquisitorius, but when Olin discovered that Bail's adopted daughter, a girl with a perfect age to be Anakin's child, was now found to be Force-sensitive, he sought out Kenobi again and demanded answers. It's hard to overestimate just how much Olin could have changed the fate of the galaxy. He was actively fighting the dark side's hold on him. He was exposed to constant interactions with the Inquisitors, Vader, and even the embodiment of the dark side itself in Sidious. And now he knew that Leia was Anakin's daughter, where Kenobi was hiding, and was smart enough to infer that Anakin's son must be the one on Tatooine. Kenobi must have been terrified to reveal the truth and put the future of the Jedi in the hands of Olin. But he did. And shortly after, Vader was sent to Alderaan. The Emperor was suspecting that a spy had to be behind the constant blunders here, with unbelievable failures like lost data on the Force-sensitive children and the rebel agents that were always slipping away on Alderaan. It's dark to wonder if Olin's help doomed the fate of this entire planet. as Palpatine never did find out who that Force child was, and had no hard evidence that Bail Organa was heading the rebel cells, and as royalty and a famous beloved senator, he couldn't just use the LAAC docs to just throw him in a torture chamber. Still, everyone in Imperial Intel knew that the galactic capital of Jedi hiding and Rebel Alliance organization was on Alderaan, so it's no wonder that this would be the perfect place to showcase the full power of the Death Star. Not just that it could blow up a planet, but it served the practical military purpose of removing this 2-decade-long thorn in the Emperor's side. And if Alderaan could be blown to stardust, it proved to all the other planets that the Emperor would be ignoring any outcry by the public or any historic prestige by ancient Republic worlds. With Vader on Alderaan personally searching for the Force Child, Olin would open himself up to a Sith holocron, hoping to use its power to defeat Vader in combat. The battle was much closer than Vader expected, but each did escape Alderaan alive. Olin ran back to Kenobi, who convinced the faux Inquisitor to dedicate the rest of his life to protecting Leia Organa while staying in the shadows, to use his skills of espionage, obfuscation, understanding of Imperial practices, and work with the nascent rebellion to mirror what Kenobi was doing with Luke on Tatooine. Now I want to pause to point out some things to keep in mind. Kenobi leaving isolation on Tatooine is not a canon invention, and Qui-Gon Jinn reaching out to him is a big theme in Legends, and something I'm almost certain we will see in the show. The Emperor and the Inquisitorius would set up shop in the Jedi Temple. I speculate that Third Sister Reva's grudge against Kenobi might be based on a belief that he betrayed and left Anakin for dead. A plausible lie from Sidious or another Inquisitor that corrupted Reva, which could have went something like Kenobi, who was the apprentice of Dooku's apprentice, was actually working with Dooku all along, and Kenobi tried to take control of the CIS on Mustafar. The beloved hero Anakin succeeded in killing the leadership and shutting down the army, but the traitorous Kenobi was able to cut his brother down, presuming to have killed him and leaving him to what he thought would be a slow, agonizing death. We've seen this base surrounded by water, in contrast to the lava surrounding Vader's castle, and I could see certain Inquisitors setting up in the temple, and imagine Reva meditating on her hatred for the Jedi, for Kenobi specifically, inside of Kenobi's old quarters, much like how Malorum set up in Yoda's quarters. I can see an interesting character arc where she comes to learn the truth about Kenobi, and with little Leia playing such a big role in the series, they're clearly going to answer some questions on how her true identity was hidden from the Inquisitors. I'm going to cast my prediction that Reva will end up turning back to the light and being the one that watches over Leia. Kenobi's parallel, and the canon parallel to Olin, perhaps even with an epic battle against Vader. Setting up in the temple would also make sense with the Grand Inquisitor of Canon, as he was once a temple guard, and developed what he described as, quote, a hatred unbecoming of a Jedi, towards the harsh Chief Librarian Jocasta Nu. He was a voracious learner, but he claimed that Nu always tried to keep him out of the archives, just had an irrational dislike for him, always making it difficult to find things, and loomed over him constantly, supposedly all without cause. He reveled in fighting her in the archives when he was the head of the Inquisitorius. So since that's true in canon, as much as they are showing this tower, revisiting the temple would definitely make sense from a lore perspective and tying it into Legends. And yet it could still be appreciated by casual fans. Everyone would love to see the Imperial era version of the temple. Now that connection to Jocasta Nu was shared with the Legends High Inquisitor Jarek, who was her apprentice and a prolific Jedi archaeologist. And with Ladinar Torben, the Grand Inquisitor after Hydra, we see another interesting dynamic is how Imperial military leaders wanted to kill Inquisitors. Many felt that the Jedi threat had been neutralized by the time of 10 BBY, and this brewed jealousy and anger amongst the high-ranking, hard-working, non-force-wielding imps, who rolled their eyes at the Emperor entertaining a whole suite of odd attendants and these obsessed, resource-wasting Jedi hunters. They became even more skeptical when Grand Inquisitor Torben visited the corporate sector, a region outside of Imperial control. Their security force, the CSA, made sure to have constant protection of this VIP, since everyone knew of the countless assassination attempts suspected to be organized by other Imperials. A Force cult that was neither Jedi or Sith had been extinguished by Torben, but a handful of survivors launched an attack in a gravity pool, locking him inside and almost drowning him, before a CSA agent's heroics saved him. Only for the Grand Inquisitor to be killed a month later when an assassin droid hijacked his shuttle and crashed it into an Imperial palace on Weirden. This attack was from other Imperials, and this is such a strong theme in Legends that I would expect we're going to see a lot of Inquisitors fighting each other and other military men trying to bring down the Inquisitors, all providing openings for our heroes, and perhaps some unlikely alliances with imps hoping for a career promotion. Torben's successor was a Zabrak named JC Iso, but he really didn't do anything of note. Well, if we look at more of those High Inquisitors, we can see some themes that might pop up. Aldalric Caesius Brandel was the only known Inquisitor to break away and go on his own, 1 year after the Battle of Endor, while Jarek tried to hold together a form of the Inquisitorius and seek out the Valley of the Jedi on Ruusan. But Aldaric would set up his own empire called the Protectorate, fighting off incursions from both the New Republic and Imperial Remnant. Definitely a possibility to tie in the post-Empire content like Book of Boba and The Mandalorian. Antinous Tremaine survived Order 66 as a Padawan, since he was captured by the Separatists after they killed his master in combat. Imperial forces liberated him, but then just transferred him to a prison with other Padawans. Vader visited them and started attacking them all through the Force, choking some, prompting the young Antinous to attack Vader by smashing the buttons on his chest panel, temporarily bringing the Sith Lord down to focus on getting his suit back online. Vader was impressed with this one, and developed him into a powerful Inquisitor with a knack for interrogation. So much so that Compnor would overcome their agency rivalry to bring him in for particularly difficult negotiations. Years later, he would suffer a surprising loss to a Jedi Padawan, and Vader rescued him from death, pulling the same trick Sidious did on him, by putting cybernetic replacements to body parts like his arm and eye that actually encumbered the Inquisitor in many ways. Just as Sidious wanted Vader to be a Force lightning bolt away from shutdown, Vader knew that despite the scary appearance, Antinous was actually made weaker by these cyborg parts. I like this idea of Vader developing his own apprentice in secret, of course seen best in Legends with Starkiller, but I could see a canon parallel to Antinous. A wounded Inquisitor manipulated in the way Vader felt he had been manipulated, and be on the lookout for seeing captured Jedi Padawans that were in the hands of the CIS at the time of Order 66. Perhaps this perceived failure by the Jedi Order and their abandonment may have helped them turn to the dark side. Last thing I want to mention is their equipment. In Legends, they were not above using any weapon necessary: blaster pistols and rifles, electro stabs and vibroblades, with some having armor made from ultrachrome, a material perhaps bested only by Beskar in the way that it could deflect blaster bolts and even the hard bullets of slug throwers, even repelling lightsabers. Not completely immune to them, but heavily resistant, and the way it worked was to absorb the energy and then quickly transfer it across the entire piece of armor. So while you could boast that no one could just cut through it or break it, with enough blows the armor would become red hot like in a furnace and melt into the flesh of the wearer. It sounds horrendous, but honestly this would never really happen, as the warrior isn't just gonna let them bash away. A killing blow would be struck by one of them long before it would ever get enough rapid hits to melt it. My favorite piece of equipment of the Inquisitorius were the Talzin amulets, made from nodules of skin from the Talzin, a 20-meter long creature that originally hailed from the jungle moon of Va'art, but could even be found in the haunted and abandoned sections of Coruscant's underworld, something Darth Maul once ran into. And what made it so unique is that it was one of the few species in the galaxy that would manipulate the Force. Famous examples of creatures like this were the Vornsker, that evolved to pick up on a prey's presence in the Force as a way of hunting them, causing the Ysalmiri species to develop a defense by reducing the Force's influence around them, which is why Thrawn used them to level the playing field. Similarly, the Inquisitors used the Talzin to make themselves invisible in the Force, allowing them to close in on their prey and ambush them. Though it is unclear if it reduced their own and the Jedi's ability to draw on the Force, I could see how they would want to do this if they felt their own martial arts or weapons were superior, or I assume they could ditch it once they got close enough to their target. But although I love how unique this is, there are some comments by George Lucas on how he doesn't like that there are organic things which all have the Force in them that can somehow tap out of the Force, and this ability does seem to have been removed by the Ysalmiri in canon. But still, it was so unique and important that I wouldn't be surprised if it makes some sort of comeback. But that's it for the Legends Inquisitorius breakdown. Tell me which, if any of these ideas, do you think we might actually see in the show, or in some future material. If you made it this far, the best way to help me out is to hit that like button, and share the video somewhere. Subscribe if you want to see more. Check out the links down below for discounts and free stuff, and ways to support us over on PayPal and Patreon. Special thanks to all our patrons, especially our $25 tier supporters, Bill Payne, Oscar Jones, and Renee Flores. But most important of all, remember, the dark side is a hell of a drug, and the Force will be with you, always.